with Asha and Steve, where communication matters. Join us as we discuss effective ways to communicate, bridge the gaps, and build long-lasting relationships within your business and life. Here are your hosts, Asha Prasad and Steve Harper.
Hey, guys.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Steve.
How are you
Steve and
doing?
Mark. Hi, I'm Dr. Asha Prasad. Thank you for joining us for Conversations with Asha and Steve for our Facebook Live and podcast. Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. We're also on LinkedIn today, so just
Great. Hello to everybody
yeah,
there.
absolutely.
We have a very special guest today with us, joining us. I can tell that he's excited to be here today. Mr. Marc Schwarz. How are you today, Mark?
I am doing well. So I'm a little bit nervous about what's in store for me over the next few minutes. But
you're here for an hour, buddy.
You,
you're here for an hour.
I'm like, it's
an
going to be a
hour.
few.
So I showed you I have my Britney Survived 2007. You can survive today coffee mug. So that is what that's gonna be my mantra over this next hour. Then yes.
Yes. I like it.
That also pretty much sums up my attitude during the book projects with both of you at times. I'm just gonna preemptively get that out.
Oh, hey, well that's great.
No.
We're gonna dive into that and so much more. I promise you.
Exactly.
We're super excited for you to be a part of Conversations with Asha and Steve. This is our actual first guest we've ever had on this podcast, and Asha and I have been doing this for like 20 years. we were recording this before anybody would listen, right? So this is an exciting, monumental day. We've got a guest for the first time ever. So thanks for being that inaugural person for us.
I'm honored. Thank you for having me.
And we're super excited
who was
because
Conan's first?
You two have been working diligently the last several months to finish up a project that we're going to talk about. Dr. Asha has a new book dropping next week. Yes.
Yes.
Asha?
Yes, that's correct.
I'm just making sure. Yeah.
That is correct.
We're super excited about it. And so, we got tons of questions because we have a lot of folks that are interested in the book writing process. We want to talk a little bit about how awesome we were to work with, Mark. I mean, you were our editor for both of our books or all of our books. So we've got this and so much more. So Asha, where do you want to kick off? I mean, I know you have a burning question you want to throw out there for.
No, you know what? I just wanted to say for those of you that don't know, Mark has been our editor for all of our books, what Steve was talking about. And I do, you know what, there are a lot of people, Mark, that are interested in the whole writing process. I have a few questions that people had asked me to ask you during our live today. So don't be worried. These are normal questions.
You definitely should be worried.
Yeah. But it would be great to hear a little bit from you, Mark, a little bit about, kind of what the process is like for you, and just tell us a little bit about you, Mark.
Okay. The process itself, I think, is certainly merits a deeper dive because it does change based on the relationship between the editor and the author. So for each of you, it was a little different in terms of what your comfort zone was working. And in essence, what my job is to help draw out that content from you, your vision, to help refine it and to help sort of polish it up so that it gets out there in the best version of itself possible. And conceptually, I think that's true for all of these projects. The nuts and bolts of how that worked was different. And it was different across the different books too, which is really interesting to me because I think that y'all evolved sort of your own working process with it a little bit as you became more comfortable. But yeah, I've been doing it. I got started back in the 90s here in Austin as a literary agent. And thought that was going to be the great opportunity to work with the next great generation of novelists. We discovered pretty quickly that publishing is a very screwed up business, and it is really difficult to be able to sometimes get even talented authors and great ideas heard. And so eventually transitioned to more of at the time self-publishing was becoming more credible because the technology between pagination and print on demand services. This, dating myself, this predates all the stuff, which then completely transformed the landscape. But that opened it up, and I think it democratized it in a way that has been really good. And the barriers now to entry are so much lower than they used to be. Now, there's a lot more competition. That's the downside, is that you don't have these gatekeepers who are, helping restrict that. But if you know how to sort of work it and get out there like you guys have done, you can get your message out there. It looks great. It sounds great. And it can be really impactful. And so I had transitioned from an agent to sort of helping people with that in the early days, did some relationship marketing work, got into public education for 12 years or so, and back in the marketing space now. And so it's been a kind of a journey for me, but the thread of it, I guess, and what I would love to hear y'all's thoughts on over the next hour when you're not making fun of me or whatever it is you have planned, is this idea of, how do you really sort of take this vision and what impels you to want to get it out there and to put it in front of people in a way that is going to change their lives or their businesses for the better. So
I think
that's my job, is just to help with that.
You and I started first working together. You kind of said, the self-publishing route there was a couple of directions you could go. It was a vanity, a play for a lot of CEOs and business leaders to get their thoughts out there. But really, it was really something to sort of say, hey, look at my strategy, look at what we've done at this company, et cetera. Then you had folks that you had worked with that were focused on a greater good, greater concept. A lot of nonprofit leaders will put that out about the mission behind what they're doing to, spread that. It becomes a great marketing vehicle and door opener. And then you have those that really have something significant to say. The audience is, still kind of maybe not totally defined, which is something that I think you're really good at helping an author figure out how to get there and determine. But I remember, you're saying, what do you want to do with the book? Because at the end of the day, all the work comes on you, right? It's going to be a situation where you're going to have to put all that energy and that effort. And I had at that point gone through the process of looking at agents and talking to a few publishers, and I was kind of thinking, well, I was kind of going to do that myself anyway with those folks, but I would not, certainly benefit financially as much as I might if I owned, the book. And I remember the conversation with you is like, hey, look, I think you have something here, and you're going to want to own the rights to that long term, which is not always the case with the publishing. If you go with a formal publishing house route, I assume that's kind of same today as it was back then.
Except now there's all the digital rights that you have to add to it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, publishers are in the business to make money, and the margins in publishing are not great. And so they are dependent in a lot of cases on those subsidiary rights. If they see there's an opportunity, and depending on the genre, it varies. But it's something that they will, particularly with new authors who don't have a lot of leverage, keep as that whole card just in case it hits big.
Yeah.
And so, I think that the nice thing about the way that the self-publishing sphere has evolved is that it really does give you total control over your message, over your work. You don't have to worry about getting into a situation where you're beholden to somebody else. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, but I find over the years, most of the people who have it in them to write a book don't lack confidence, and they want to embrace that challenge and really lean into it. And so, that is an inspiring kind of situation for them, not something that deters them.
Yeah.
But to your point, I will say this: I think where books become really valuable is that there's so much noise out there right now, and the digital landscape is cluttered with it. Social media has made that so much worse.
Yeah.
But even before that, just think about conventional advertising. How do you really penetrate that static and make an impact on people? And it's hard. And for a while, what we saw was people trying to be more extreme and to really be in your face about how you get the message out there. What we find with books is that it's an alternative that is really high trust, it's high credibility. It is, at the base level, maybe just a really expensive business card if you don't know how to use it. But if
Hmm.
you do, it becomes so much more. And, that's, I've watched both of you over the years take that message that was this inchoate idea that then became crystallized in the form of books and put out there to be vehicles for your mission in terms of serving your clients. And it's been a great vantage point for me to be able to see that. And I think it really validates this approach and how you can leverage this. People react to stories and books, even
Yeah.
if it's a nonfiction, there's a narrative there that people, I think, instinctively respond to favorably in a way that they never will to a commercial or a print ad or any
Hmm.
of those conventional marketing tools.
Yeah, I agree. I think
Yeah.
it opens a lot of doors and opportunities. The book has taken me places that I never expected ever that it would. Right at the end of the
Yeah.
day, I think if you have a purpose and a mission, like I think Dr. Asha and I do behind our work, is we want to make a bigger impact. We want to do more with it. That I think people can see that. We've all been at conferences where there's a speaker at the front of the room and we've got a book at the back of the room, and you
Hmm.
kind of feel like it was,
Hmm.
there's just sort of that, incongruent kind of messaging around the concept, the topic or whatever. And then they got a book that they're really pushing. Ours are more mission based, and it's like, hey, if you're, want to know more about this process, we encourage you to pick up the book, but it's not necessarily something you have to do at the end of the day. But I feel like the book is one kind of arrow in the quiver, right, so to speak, where you can actually
Hmm.
leverage this as another way to get your message out and to build upon that expertise. It's the perfect platform.
It definitely is. One of the things that I realized and saw is it's just a different avenue that people can reach
Yeah,
you. Like that you can reach them, but they can reach you because there's some people that want to read a book or read a message and kind of study it and kind of let it soak in
yeah,
before they even approach you. I've had clients do that actually. Read the book first, my first book, The Authentic Climate, and then come to me later and say, "Well, I read your book. I wanted to just kind of take it in and see how I could apply that into my organization. Can we have a conversation?" And it was very interesting because that's one of the things that I've seen is that it just provides a different way of being able to reach a different group of people that you never would have been able to
yeah.
reach, even with social media, even with the digital world that we live in right now. This is such a different, it's just another, like what Mark was saying, it is like a business card,
Yeah.
but that's extending even further. Yeah.
So, Mark,
I
was this
think it
something
allows
that
you
you
to
were
sort
all?
of
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I
Right.
was going to say, I think it allows you to sort of proactively relationship build too, which is what's really
Yeah.
fascinating. And I don't think that works for everybody,
Yeah.
but the books
Right.
that y'all wrote have so much of yourselves in it. Your personalities really shine through, and it is part of your mission and your message. And so I think anybody who spends time with that gets some of that
Hmm.
benefit of being around you, and they start to know you, and I think that they want to know you more. And so to your point, Asha, I think absolutely,
Hmm.
people who counter that and then come in, they've already advanced down that road a little bit where there's some trust there because they're comfortable
Right.
at least with knowing here's what you're about. They see your values right up front, and I think that's true for both of the well, the several books that you both have done. And I think that's tremendously valuable, when
Right.
so much of the challenge again is not just cutting through the noise, but establishing that
Yeah.
credibility with the people
Exactly.
that we're trying to reach.
So, was the
Right.
literary field something that you always had interest in? How did you get involved first as a literary agent, and then ultimately getting in as an editor and sort of helping with the publishing process? Was it something you always had kind of a burning desire to do from your youth?
No, not really.
I
I,
kind of knew that. I kind of
I mean, look what it did
I
for
have,
you. I mean, you met us. I
I know.
mean,
I
this is
know,
awesome.
I know. No, I've always been into writing. I did a lot of journalism in high
Mm.
school. I competed in UIL journalism and won some state
Well,
level competitions. And I worked for a little local newspaper in West Texas. That was my first job. I sort of
okay.
thought that might be a route that I would take, and then I realized that journalists, particularly print journalists, do not get paid very well. And
Mm.
I was told that I have a face for radio, and that also did not pay very well. So, so I was in college. I had done some work with an advertising agency here in Austin, enough to realize that it was a deeply flawed model, and I wasn't all that thrilled about that as a prospect either. And a friend of mine who was an attorney is the one who said, "Hey, we're thinking about just doing a startup here as a literary agency, because Austin is such a fertile place for new authors and has this really burgeoning literary community. But at the time, there was really just one or two agencies to serve it. And, we didn't know what we didn't know. We were young and dumb, and we just kind of jumped in with both feet to see what this would look like. And it was a huge education. But then over the next few years, we sort of evolved that to be able to provide some more substantive services, in part because authors weren't getting feedback from publishers. It's a machine that is interested in getting things in that then it can use. And so these people who had poured their hearts and souls into creating a book would get this little rejection letter that would just say, yeah, we don't want it. And that would break my heart, because
oh gosh, yeah,
there was an opportunity, I think, at least to provide them with some kind of meaningful feedback. And we incorporated that into what we would do. So we would never send just a form rejection letter. We would always find something that we liked about it and be able to complement that. And then we would, give them some kind of a direction for improving it, and say, this is what we think you should work on. Yeah. And, people would thank us for that, which is still to this day, 25 years later, bizarre to me that people would thank us for being rejected. Yeah. But it was still a very different model than what they had. And then eventually, we realized we liked working with authors, and that was what we wanted to do. We enjoyed working with authors more than we enjoyed working with publishers. And we wanted to help people bring those dreams up. And if there was a high credibility way for them to do it and be successful, we were for it. And so we became more selective at that point about, who we would take on, because not every book really is a good candidate for self-publishing. I mean, that's the reality. Nonfiction is always going to be easier. Being able to make it part of your marketing efforts. So, Steve, like you were talking about the keynote speakers, people who are interested in entering that space and talking to groups and holding workshops. You almost need to have a book, some kind of a product there. But poetry, God bless it. It's great to read it. It has never been profitable, and it never will be. And if you are self-publishing a book of poems, you just need to understand that, that you are going to put it out there, give it away to family and friends for Christmases and birthdays and bar mitzvahs, but don't think that somehow it's going to transform your bank account. So, but that's kind of the I guess the long and the short. So it was an evolution over the better part of probably about 7 years, I would say. Before I met Steve. And that was where, by that point, I think we had seen sort of the power and the potential in that. And, like I said, we were pretty selective about who to work with. Yeah. In Steve's case, maybe not selective enough, but.
I agree. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, it's accurate. I'm just saying.
But that was, he fit a lot of those check boxes in terms of, here was somebody who, was looking at a nonfiction book, who was going to use it, to try to accomplish a bigger mission, who had a plan, although it was pretty sketchy at the beginning, but, it evolved into how he was going to leverage that to help get his message out. And, those are the things that we sort of looked for. And so I've been fortunate that, and particularly since then, I get to be pretty selective about who I've worked with. And, it needs to be a good fit in terms of personality. But first and foremost, I got to think that whatever we produce is going to be successful for the author with whatever their goals are. Yeah. And, there have been people who've come who've said, I want to, sell 50,000 copies of the book. And, okay, that probably is not realistic to do through this path in a year's time. And I've turned those away for that reason.
Yeah. I remember at the time when you started working with me, I think my proposal was sketchy book proposal at the time. I'm not exactly sure, but One of the things that I respected and admired about you was I thought my book was going to go down one particular path, right? At the time, it was sort of a how-to book for sales professionals,
Mm-hmm.
right? People either getting into the sales game or people looking to remake their career, because I had a very specific expertise in that space, having been a young entrepreneur and worked with a number of sales professionals, but kept coming back down to this piece about the relationship and how critical and important it was. And I remember you taking a step back. You're like, you sold your company and you knew me before I sold the company, and you had seen that process and all that had gone through. And you asked me specifically, what was it that made you a better, entrepreneur, a better business owner? And I said, I kept my eyes and ears open for opportunity. That's how I built the relationships for the clients. And, I don't remember who brought up the concept of the ripple, but we did arrive at the ripple being like casting that stone, right? And those actions that you take on behalf of others, they ripple out, but they also ripple back and they make an impact. And you're like, that is what we need to write on. And that's what you need to focus on in it. From that point forward, it was like a complete shift in terms of the energy and the momentum that we picked up, and we never let up, right? We were grateful to have at the beginning of this year, the third edition come out for the ripple effect. It still sells extremely well. We still have people that find out about that message in ways that it surprises me. I know it surprises you, and it's just been a labor of love. But that's the value of what you've brought to the table, right? Being able to tease that out of somebody that has the kernel of an idea to really expand that out and to make it into something full blown opportunity, right?
I have to agree with that. You know what, Mark, you have a very keen ability. And I think it of course depends on who you're working with and if there's a match personality wise, or, you have to be able to work together. But you do have a really, really keen ability to be able to kind of see past what we come to you with, what I've come to you with. You just have this ability to be able to see this entire other vision that you're like, okay, look over here, expand your view a little bit, and it's like, oh yeah, that's out there. So it's really but I think that that's something unique to you. I mean, I haven't worked with any other editor, of course, but I think that that's very unique to you. I mean, I know I've seen it in the process that you've had with Steve, but also for myself, that ability. I do have a question that
Okay.
one of my clients asked me to ask you is and she wanted to know, how involved do you, like, how do you, whenever you are editing a book, she wanted to know, how involved do you get with the subject matter?
Wow, that's a great question. Uh, it does absolutely, I think, over the course, because writing a book takes time, obviously. And so,
Hmm.
with all of the projects, this is several months. And Asha, with your latest book, I mean, there's a whole other story there about
There's
how
a
this
whole
one
other story.
evolved, which is really fascinating for me because that's completely unique. But yeah,
Yeah.
I do feel like by the end of it, I've been immersed in that content for a while. And so I
Right.
wouldn't say that, I've become an expert, but for me, it's about trying to see through that lens. And so
Hmm.
I may not know it, but I at least get an idea of some questions to ask.
Right.
You guys as the authors are the foundational experts. That's why you're writing the book. That's the whole essence of it. My job is to try to tease out that expertise. And so I
Right.
would say that, I don't end up as an expert, obviously, but I end up as, maybe, I would say maybe sort of that grad student level where at least, I'm not,
Right.
sort of a journeyman in it. I know what questions to ask. I can hopefully
Hmm.
sort of anticipate a little bit, what your take on an issue would be, or what
Hmm.
stories or content might be appropriate, and then be able to put those in front of you and say, what do you think about this? So that you can, roll that in and react to it.
Right.
So,
Right. No,
so
that's great.
we
Yeah.
have a question
So-
in from
sure.
Davis. He said, "Do you write the book and then get an editor, or do you suggest is the best process? What do you suggest is the best process?"
That's a good
So
one.
yeah, that's a great question too. It not to sound weaselly, but it depends on how you like to work, and I have done both over the years. Some of it I think depends on how clear your vision is, and how confident
Mm.
you are in your writing ability. If you have no problem sort of pounding this thing out, um, the editor is there to be an honest witness. And
Mm,
so,
I like
you know,
that.
if you give that to them at the end of it, just be prepared for feedback that may result in some sort of substantial revisions potentially. But at the beginning, if you work with them from the start, it's more like building a house, and they're, you know, almost like that contractor or even that architect
Exactly.
for you at the beginning. They're helping you envision the structure of it and then helping execute that. And so all of that is, I think, capable of, you know, again, it's very individualized. There's not a right or
Hmm.
a wrong way.
Yeah,
In general, it's what's right or wrong for you, what feels better. And I've had successful projects that have gone both ways.
great. We also have another question in from Chrissy. Describe the best way for a potential author to get started, in your opinion.
Just right.
Just right.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it starts with getting words on paper and really thinking about what your message is going to be. And again, depending on, you know, what your goals are, is this something that, you know, you're thinking with an eye towards getting it published by one of the big houses? Is it something that you're, you know, thinking about using it in your own business, or you know, in a way that sort of ties into your other goals? But at the end of the day, you've got to have an idea, and that idea has substance when you write it down. And so, you know, that helps. Steve, when we worked
Yeah.
together that first time at that coffee shop, I mean, he came now. There were things scrawled on pieces of paper, and I'm pretty sure napkins. And it was just this sort of like, here you go, here's my book.
Oh, God.
Sort of like that. Let's just be honest, right? I do
I
have
don't think there
some
were
Rain Man
napkins, but
tendencies. Let's be honest. So yeah,
I don't think there was actually anything on a napkin, but my memory colors that in because it's a better story that way. That's what an editor does, Steve, is that
yep.
we take what
Yes.
was real and we make it a little bit better. So,
I do remember
um,
handing all the paper to you and saying, "Okay, I'm going to the bar. Good luck with this. You know,
yeah.
we'll see what happens." But yeah, well, and you know, it's kind of funny. In all honesty, I think probably Chrissy, for our perspective, and Asha, you know, you chime in here too. You know, I think for us that just right advice that Marc gave is essential.
Yeah.
And for me, I have a, a plethora of journals that I have around all my office and my
Yeah.
home, and you know, in my car, things that I know at some point work, inspirations, turn of phrases, things that I might want to use in a
Yeah.
future work. Those things become really essential for me to capture when they cross my mind, and they become some of the inspiration to maybe write, whether it be a blog
Hmm.
post or whether it be an article or the beginnings of the next book, right? So Asha, how did you go about that process?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I'm an avid journaler my entire life and everyone. I've got tons of journals all around. And it's really funny because I came across a journal from 2007. Okay, Mark, 2007. We wrote Authentic Alignment. It was released in 2016.
Mhm.
And it was really interesting. I came across a journal the other day, just last week actually, and I was flipping through the pages, just kind of reflecting on what was going on because that was right before I moved to Europe, and I was just looking at what was going on in my life. And it's very interesting to me because I had an outline of a book, which I did not know would 9 years later end up being the book that was released. And it was really funny because, you know, I would look at that. I thought, oh my God, I didn't even know that I even jotted that down because a lot of times I just kind of do, you know, just like this conscious, right? Just let things flow
Yeah.
into my journal. But I do think that it is about writing, getting your ideas out and getting into the habit of doing that will help you kind of have that stream of consciousness, that stream of, you know, of the ideas and the creativity. And then, of course, you know, I find working with an editor earlier on, I think it's actually, that was for me personally a better process. So that way I could get focused really quickly, you know, earlier on in the project, because I think sometimes that once you've already completed something and you hand it over to somebody, there's just so many things that need to get changed and you're in a different state of mind at that point.
Yep.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Well, for
And that
those
was a
that,
difference between you two, I will say, because you know, Steve, once we got the concept, it was very much okay. Here's, you know, it went pretty fast after that in
yeah,
terms of okay, here's
Hmm.
sort of the chapters. Here's what I want to talk about. Here's content. With Asha, we spent a lot more time at the beginning
Yeah.
on visioning it, structure. How does this all tie together? You know, before we ever got into the actual writing. And,
Yeah.
you know,
I'm
I mean, even with
slow.
the first, no, it's not that. But even with the first book, it was just, you
Yeah.
know, I kept wondering, like, at what point is this lady going to, you know, like ask me, wait a minute, you haven't actually done any editing yet.
Right.
What am I paying
Right.
you for? But, you
Yeah.
know, because it's like one more call of, okay, let's really talk through here what the table of contents is going to look like.
Yeah.
And but you know, it's like, again, those architectural drawings for a house, you've got to have the
Right.
plan so that you really understand what you're creating towards, because if you don't,
Yeah.
it's real easy to spend a lot of time, and in the moment especially, you know, you get caught up in the writing. It's energizing, it's positive, you're excited
Yeah.
about it, and then you come back to it and you realize, oh, this doesn't actually fit. It's not tight,
Right.
and it's not aligned to what we want to do.
So that's
So,
actually a
yeah.
perfect segue, because I want to capture something that you guys, because this latest book, which releases next week, is one of those situations where you guys were kind of working and sort of going one direction, and after numerous conversations, and trust me, Mark, I've been in those
Oh,
calls
God.
with Asha. I know how that is. I do. It's just like, but you just got to let her go. I mean, she just will go to, you know, but, you know, for those of you tuning in, and we've certainly appreciated, drop us any questions that you have. You know, this is a conversation with Marc Schwarz. Marc's worked with both Asha and myself on our books. And so if you have a question about writing a book or anything around the publishing process, self-publishing, etc., you know, Marc's here. He's the expert. He'd be happy to answer and give you some perspective. But you guys have a book coming out next week. I'm going to put this up on the screen and make sure everybody sees it. Asha, do you want to just give a quick, you know, little plug about the book, and then let's talk about how this actually ended up being the end product?
Yeah. So this is The Chrysalis Awakening, 5 questions for rediscovering your purpose and potential in uncertain times. This book, it's interesting because this book was obviously written during the pandemic, during the COVID pandemic. And Marc and I were actually working on a different book initially. And what happened in that process is, you know, you try to ignore, I mean, you try to kind of shut out the noise of everything that's going on, and you try to stay focused on, okay, this is what we're doing. But then that hit, and it was like, okay, it just disrupted everything. And Marc and I, we struggled for a couple of months, probably more than a couple of months, Marc, about what are we doing? Like, how are we going to get this? And I could not focus on the other material that I so badly wanted to write in the other book. I just couldn't focus on it because of everything that was going on in the whole world. I mean, you know, personally and professionally, things were getting affected for me in a big way, and just everything. So we had some really, you know, just some open and honest conversations about it. Marc was able, he actually caught on to it sooner, that, hey, Asha, you know what? We kind of need to hit the pause button. Let's talk about this. What's going on? And that's how this other book emerged, because this was the book that needed to be written right now. This is the book that I myself needed in so many ways, because it is about going through uncertain times. It's not just about the COVID pandemic, but it is about how do you navigate yourself into, you know, transforming whatever needs to be transformed in any uncertain times in your life, because we all go through it. It just so happens that, you know, right now we've been going through it in a global way. A lot of times it happens in our individual lives. But, you know, so that's how this came about. I mean, it was quite painful at times, wouldn't you say, Marc? You can say it because it was for me. I know it was.
But it's okay. Every book is painful.
Yeah.
Every book is painful. It's part of the process. Growth is painful.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and I think it's meaningful to the author because it's painful. You know, you look back and you get a sense it was a real accomplishment because of that. But this was unique though, because I remember it was a struggle, and you know, we didn't want to create a book that was you know, nothing about it was completely influenced by COVID, but at the same time, when we were trying to pretend that we weren't in a pandemic, it felt really intellectually dishonest. And it was really hard to get into that space where we could envision this post-pandemic world and write to that. And so, I still remember, you know, I was driving to San Antonio and talking to you, and I just thought, okay, we got to have this conversation, because this is not working. And that was rare for me in my professional life, where hitting that kind of a block where it's like, I just don't know what to do. And I was so relieved when, as soon as I said it, you said, yeah, I feel the same way. This is terrible. and then it really
Yeah,
reinvigorated the process because we were
it
able to
did.
hit pause on
Yeah,
the Prasad principles, which
yep,
you'll be getting back to soon enough.
yes,
But then to
yes,
really dive into this and say, okay, yeah, what is this? And what started out as how is COVID impacting us and what do we learn from that, then sort of grew on its own into this. Okay, COVID is this
yeah,
extreme example of it, but everybody is going to go through some kind of period of anxiety or uncertainty. And what are the
right.
lessons that we can learn from those experiences, whether or not that's
Exactly.
personal or global?
Yeah,
So tell us about
absolutely.
the book launches September 1st. It's available
September
for
1st.
pre-order now on Amazon, right? And that'll be the
Yes, that's
digital
correct.
edition. And then we'll have the ability for the books to ship the same week, or will that be later on in the month, or when? What's the plan there?
They will be able to ship, from what I understand, that'll be able to ship within 5 days,
Okay,
within a week, basically after
great,
that. Yeah,
great.
exactly. So that should be ready. And I'm in the process of recording the Audible, which Steve has encouraged me to do from early on. So I'm in the process of doing that, and that will be out shortly as well.
Yep, and you're loving
Yeah,
every minute of that process.
I am. I'm embracing it.
Well, it's new
Trying to
territory
embrace it.
for you, so you're stretching
It
yourself,
is.
right?
It
It's a
is
labor of
exactly.
love. Once you have it done, it will be the greatest thing ever. It's just like when you guys put a pin in this book and you were done,
Yeah,
and you just the writing was over, the editing was over. You can take
yeah,
that big breath and be like, okay, I'm glad I'm on the other side of it. But the process
yes.
going through it can sometimes be challenging and painful. But once you're there, then you have the reward of being done. So you're close. You're close. So we'll just keep plugging along. In fact, you probably have 6 hours of recording still left to do today, right?
No, not that many, actually, Steve. You'd
Oh,
be proud of me.
wow! I'm impressed. I'm really impressed. Well, so we do
Yeah,
have another question in from a listener.
sure.
Tina asked, which is better, self-publishing or getting a publisher?
Mm,
It depends on what your goals are.
Yeah,
Self-publishing is obviously more involved and requires a financial commitment. That is less, I think, of a commitment than it used to be if you want to use more of the digital formats. There's some opportunities, print on demand, and then going just the ebook route, to limiting the cost on that. In the old days, you'd end up with 5,000 copies of a book
yeah,
sitting in your garage, because that was the only way that it would be feasible by unit cost. Getting a publisher means that you're not the one incurring the financial risk. And so, if that is your primary concern, then I think that it's always worth looking into. Uh, the downside is it's really competitive and it's a really lengthy
mhm.
process.
yeah,
And so, if you approach them, a lot of publishers won't deal with you unless you get an agent. And so, you have to find an agent first, and then you're going to pay that person royalty or a commission on the royalties that you get. They're going to market it to a publisher. There's a lot of politics that go into play. And then on the back end, just because you get a publisher, and this is what broke my heart back in the 90s, this is ultimately, I think, why we started to work directly with authors, because we would help people get these publishing contracts. And we were young and naive, and we thought, okay, this is it. This is the win. We break open the
Mhm.
champagne and we celebrate, and we've helped bring another author to the stage. And then you realize that the publishers really aren't spending a lot to market those people.
yeah,
They're putting their
Yeah,
resources, which are extremely limited, behind people who have a proven track record, or people that they think that they've identified as being those really sort of exceptional breakout titles that can generate a lot of buzz and profit for them. And so most
right.
authors don't really get much from the publisher.
yeah,
And your book being on the shelf, I mean, it's sitting there spine out. So you've got, this, you know, 3/4 of an inch of real estate competing with everything else. And
Yeah,
it doesn't mean that it's going to be successful. And we saw a number of authors who ended up with that situation where, they thought, okay, I'm a published author. This is it. I've crossed the finish line.
yeah,
And that wasn't the case.
yeah,
So, I think, again, it goes back to what your goals are. If this is a way to particularly advance a career in speaking, or doing workshops, or consulting, I think that there is, if you have the financial resources to do it, some merit in at least considering the self-publishing route. But it doesn't, and doing so doesn't mean that you necessarily close the door on the commercial publishing aspect.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, you can get considerably more leverage. There are some success cases where people, even in the old days, the classic example was Leadership Secrets of Attila the Hun, which this guy self-published and sold tens and thousands of copies of it. And then eventually a publisher said, wait a minute, this is doing really well. We want in. And they had rejected it on the front end. When he went back with this proven track record of sales, he was able to get obviously a much better deal.
Yeah.
And then they did throw their support behind it. So, you can get some leverage that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah, I will say,
but it's a great question.
From my experience, I early on, I went that route, kind of researching that, and sort of a pivot time. Mark's heard this story, but there was an author by the name of Harvey McKay, who I have been a big fan of for a long time. He's a motivational speaker and ran an envelope company in Minneapolis, I believe, and was very successful in the approach that he took for the business and what he did. And, kind of a personal hero of mine going through high school. My dad had brought home his first book, Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive. And I became instantly hooked on becoming an entrepreneur based on that book. And years later, I was kicking this idea around about the ripple effect. And we were in the process. We were actually in the throes. But, despite working with Marc, I was still like, can we get it out there? Will anybody other than my, a few hundred people buy the book, and will the rest of the inventory, like Marc said, will my dad buy the rest, and that'll be the end of it, right? Kind of thing. And I went to an event in Austin. A good friend of mine, who had supported me throughout the writing process, took me to an event where Harvey was speaking at a country club for an event for his current book that was being released. And I was super jazzed because I got to go into a kind of a pre-event where it was a happy hour with Harvey, and you got a copy of his new book, and you got to, have him autograph it and just say a few words. And I mentioned to him at the time, in fact, I actually, just was telling the story last week on a podcast episode that's dropping today for the Ripple Effect. This was a pivotal time because I told him he was a hero of mine. And the whole reason I was standing there as an entrepreneur was because of him. And he was like, oh, I need to know more about this, kid. Stand to the side. I want to come and talk to you. And so I told him about publishing, going through the process of, we were going to go self-publish on the book, and I was still, questioning. And he said, let me tell you something. I'm going to send you something. And he said, if I had everything to do over again, I would self-publish. And the reason why is because you are in complete control. Once it's in the hands of a publishing house, there are a lot of things that you don't have that control on. And he said, let me just send you something. And I was very intrigued. Okay, sure. Gave him my address. 2 days later, FedEx showed up at my house with this envelope that was like this thick of articles, handwritten notes, things that he had collected over the years about the self-publishing game and the approach, how to market, how to get the, the same level of attention that, these big, well-known authors and publishing houses are getting, and it was just such an unbelievable gesture for someone who, didn't need to do that at all. And he said, hey, and I remember Marc, he said, hey, go see if he'll, give you a, endorsement for the book. And he said he couldn't because, it was another example of the challenges that he had in terms of being handcuffed by what his agent would approve and or the publisher that he was working for. But just that fact that he took that time and energy to put that in front of me, and I still have it today. I mean, I look at it occasionally just because anytime I feel like a little down or I need to get some motivation to get out there and push my book a little more, I go to that envelope. And so for me, the publishing process has been significant to control it from start to finish. What about you, Asha?
I have to agree with that, Steve. I have to agree with that completely because I think that there is something to say about having that control and that ability to direct it in whatever way that you want to do. I mean, and it does close doors if you are bound by certain, rules and regulations and contracts and all of those things. I think that there is something to say you have, your destiny is in your control, basically, of what you want to do, what you want to do with that book and how you want to take your message out there. So I definitely agree with that. And it's interesting because for me, I think I maybe thought of regular publishing for a second before Steve was just like, no, you're going to talk to Marc and then you're going to decide that. So it's like, yeah, okay. I didn't spend too much time thinking about that after that conversation. So
I've sent more
yeah,
people to Mark mainly because he can either talk them off the ledge of not going through the insane process of publishing a book,
yes.
or will help tease out that concept and that idea.
Yeah.
And without question, I mean, he's been the greatest asset to me all these years. I know he's encouraging me to work on something new, a new edition, as opposed to just continuing to put editions of the Ripple Effect out, and we will. But I think having that close bond and that close relationship with someone that sees what you see and will help guide and direct that creative process is it's just worth its weight in gold.
Definitely. I think also, Marc, you see things that we don't see. And I think anybody that will work with you, that you take on, that any author that you work with, even in the future, will start to realize that, because you do have that ability to see that, and I think it helps us as authors. I will say that for myself, Steve, probably for you too.
Yeah.
We've been able to step into kind of bigger shoes for ourselves because of that, because somebody was able to see that and be able to bring that out in us, that some of the things that we were just not able to recognize before. So thank you for that.
No, absolutely. That's the fun of it, is being able to see the possibilities and try to tease that out. And that's why I've over the years became more and more selective about the people I wanted to work with, because
Right.
I had to see that there was a compelling vision there that I wanted to be a part of, and I had to feel like this is somebody that we could have a great working relationship, and ideally really a friendship, because there is a vulnerability to it, especially on your end.
Yes.
You guys are putting out your ideas and your words, and then my job is to tear that apart and to give you this honest feedback. And nobody likes criticism. Whatever we say, nobody likes it, really.
We love
And
it.
so,
We love it.
Yeah.
well, but you guys are exception. You guys are exceptional in that way. That at least you. If I ever ticked you off, you hit it very, very well, because you were very receptive to these ideas. Not everybody is. There are people that I worked with where we would give some feedback, and they would look at it, and you could tell they were not happy with that, because for them
Right.
it was, this is it, it's done, it's finished. I really don't want you to do anything except check my grammar. That's fine, that's valid. Again,
Yeah.
it's about
Right.
your goals and what control of the process you want. I would just say that's not a real editorial partnership at that point,
Yeah.
because you don't have
Right.
somebody who's riding shotgun, who is ultimately looking out for your best interests as an author.
Yeah.
Because that's part of it, is to say, my job is to try to ensure that we get the strongest possible book out there. And that means that, yes, I have to be critical sometimes, because the world is a critical place.
Yeah.
So if you can't handle it from your agent or your editor, good luck when it gets out into the marketplace and you start seeing reviews, especially in this digital age.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
people can be, behind the anonymity of their screen, be very, very cruel sometimes. So
Yes,
you
they
got
can.
to develop a thicker skin,
Yeah.
even in the best of circumstances, but particularly in that author editor relationship.
Absolutely. I would say you only made me cry at least 2 or 3 times. I mean,
A week.
A week.
I still have the corner of my, my house where I would just curl up in a ball. Like, why are we doing this? No, the process is, what you're saying is absolutely legit. You need somebody, and I've had people. In fact, I have a corporate client right now that I didn't refer to you, who is all over writing a book and just continues to bug me about the introduction. But she just looks at it from, this is, kind of what I had mentioned earlier, a vanity piece that she thinks that she can tout out there to open more business. And maybe it will for her. And in all respect, I think her approach to it is a little bit challenged, because she really just wants to give somebody the ideas to do it and then basically have someone ghostwrite it. And I think there was so much more. And my recommendation to her, I said, hey, look, if I'm going to introduce you to my guy, he's a true partner in this process, but he's not going to do all the heavy lifting. So you're pretty consistent with delegating the heavy work around your company. But the publishing and the writing process is so much different. And if you're really going to make it successful, and you're really going to be able to turn it into a real something you can be proud of, right? You have to be willing to put in the work yourself, and you're going to have to handle criticism. I don't do criticism. Well, I would say then, that you're probably not going to be, this would probably not be the best direction for you. So I probably helped you dodge a bullet there, but at the end of the day, I get and understand the value of what you do. And I think that there are a lot of people that will be happy to take a check. And like you said, sure, I'll check your grammar and I'll go through for sentence structure, but I'm not invested in the author. I'm not invested in the topic or the process. And therefore that book ends up reflecting that in the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the challenges is that, editing, it's not like you have a license to do it.
Yeah.
So you can go out there and, get on Fiverr and find somebody who says they're an editor who is, probably a graduate student somewhere. And for that proofreading part, it's probably fine. But to get somebody who is a real thought partner in the process and can really help bring out the best incarnation of that book, that's a different skill set. And some people will come to it saying, I just need this thing proofread and, this sort of superficial editing put on there. That's completely fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But I would say to your listeners here, if it's something where you have a project in mind, you have to really think about what is that editorial relationship that you want. Do you want someone who's going to be a thought partner, who's going to help you visualize this from start to finish? Is it somebody that you want to just give content to and have them do a sort of a polish on it? Is it somebody that at the end they're just going to check your grammar and spelling and do the things that a Microsoft Word spell check can't for whatever reason? Right. Know what it is you want out of that relationship, and you'll be a lot happier with the results.
Yeah. Asha, do you have any other questions for Marc? I know you said you had a couple from clients.
Let's see. Oh, the other question that I had from one of my clients was that, how do you keep motivated in the process yourself? Like, you are busy motivating the authors, but how do you keep motivated?
Wow, that is a great question. Actually, it's a challenge too. I mean, it can be just because it's a marathon, and so there are times where I'm not feeling it, and particularly with this latest project, Asha. I mean, that was the most challenging I think I've had, where that the motivation is we're trying to not the
I agree. No.
But when we're working on the Prasad principles and we're struggling with the news and how do we insulate the book from that to a certain extent, because it is not designed to just be this complete moment in time capture of that. It's got to have a shelf life that extends beyond that. How do we balance that? And ultimately, we found a path. I think that for me, part of that motivation is the right synergy with the author. And with both of you, that's been the difference, is that, I always enjoyed the interactions, so that when we get together, whether it was over coffee, to talk about the ripple effect, that was a lot of what we did. Or Asha, I mean, we're in different continents, different time zones. We would talk, usually once a week. And the first half an hour of that was us shooting the breeze about what was going on in the world and our lives. And it was this, ad hoc therapy session for me sometimes. And that was really therapeutic, I think, in keeping the motivation going. And so I would end those interactions fired up and ready to come back into it. So I think that relationship, it's not a one-way street where the author is getting all of the motivation. It's synergistic. The editor, ideally, at least for me, it's like I'm getting something out of it too, and I'm coming out of that energized.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Let me see. I jotted some. Let me see if I have. No, I already asked you that. I asked you that. See, I jotted these down on literally a little piece of paper, which I Post-it. What I know. What would you recommend?
No comment about the way that you wrote the book.
He just got like.
I mean, what? Come on, catch up.
Just Post-it pictures of Post-its. Yeah, just sending it from my cell phone.
I put together a Pinterest page for you to look at, Schwarz. Just, see what you can do with
there
this.
You go.
And it's not a picture book, apparently, right? So it doesn't really help.
Exactly. No, the only other question that one of my clients did ask was, as far as whenever you are like, do you suggest to anybody, whenever an author approaches you about working together, do you ever suggest like staying away from certain topics? That was his question. I don't know exactly. Like, are there certain things that you just say, you know what, especially if they're trying to, let me say this, especially when they're trying to build credibility for themselves as a business owner or in their professional life, are there certain things that you
That's a
just
good
say,
question.
don't do it?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is going to roll into how what your goals are and what your message
Mm-hmm.
is. Either there
Mm-hmm.
have been projects that because I did not like the message, I
Right.
rejected out of hand because I didn't want to have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
I would say,
Right.
like
Yeah.
anything else, if you think about it from that marketing lens, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
that is fundamentally what this is a marketing tool. So
Right.
would this be a way that you would approach any other marketing platform? Would you put that on social
Mm.
media? Would you put it in an ad campaign? Would you do a commercial around it? And if you have any
Right.
sort of concerns about what that's going to do to your prospective clients or customers, then I would
Mm-hmm.
say, yeah, you probably should hit pause and at least give it some deep
Right.
thought. It's hard to know without sort of the specifics of it because there are controversial topics that you may want to address, and you can do so in a way that is not going to alienate your core audience, and that's
Mm-hmm.
fine. I mean, there are plenty of controversial books out there, and controversy can sell. But is
Yeah.
that the brand that you want to create? And if it is, I think that's a viable path. But my caution would just be, what you want to do is to make sure that you're intentional about those choices and that they're not
Mm-hmm.
happening by accident.
Right.
That's the danger, is that you just
Yeah.
get blindsided because you didn't consider it. And on the back
Yeah.
end, suddenly you're trying to clean up the mess as opposed to saying, okay, I know that this is going to, strike some people maybe the wrong way, but for other people,
Mm-hmm.
this is going to produce the reaction that I want. And that is my goal in this.
Yeah.
Right.
And if that's the goal, then yeah, it's valid.
Okay.
That's
No,
good.
great. Great. Thank
Well,
you.
That's an interesting
we're,
question.
we're getting close to the top of the hour. I want to, I certainly want to say thank you, Marc, for joining us today. I mean, it's been very illuminating. I think our listeners and our audience, if you're catching this on the replay on Facebook or on YouTube, definitely put some questions in there. We'll all be monitoring that just to make sure that we
Yeah.
are responsive to that. But Marc, in the interim, if someone has a specific question or wants to inquire about your services, how would they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, so I would say, connect with me there. And if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'm pretty selective at this point about, projects. So,
Yeah.
I'm happy to have the conversation just to give some advice. Things develop, they develop, and that's great. But, I really want to make sure that for people who are considering this route, that they understand what's involved, and that they make the best decision for their future in whatever field they're interested in pursuing. And if my experience and my advice can give them some insight or at least a different perspective on that, I'm happy to do
Mm-hmm.
it. So yeah, send questions, and have a conversation. Even get a cup of coffee when COVID is, not that ever happens.
Raging.
Uh,
Yeah. And the exciting news is next week is the labor of love between the two of you for the Chrysalis Awakening, 5 questions for rediscovering
Yes.
your purpose and potential in uncertain
so
times.
excited about that.
Available now for pre-order. And next week, Asha,
Mm-hmm.
we are going to be the whole episode is going to
Yes.
be about this book, this exciting topic, and
Yes.
I can't wait. I mean, we're going to celebrate. We're going to do it upright in terms of
Yes.
the launch of this book. But I'm so proud of both of you, and I'm grateful that you guys are continuing to work together, and that this is an exciting time for you, and I can't wait to see where the book goes and what it does. Like we said, it's available now at Amazon.com, and we'll be talking more about it next week.
Yep. Thank you very much. I'm excited about it too. You know what, Steve? This is a ripple that you created a long, long time ago that has just been continuing to ripple.
Yeah.
So
Well, it was my great pleasure because I knew the brilliance you had, I knew the brilliance Marc had, and great people that you meet and need to know one another. It just makes it super simple. So it's I'm super proud of both of you for doing what you've done and continue to do. So keep it up. And obviously you have a
Thank you.
third book in the hopper now, right? Apparently.
Yes.
It's there. It's there.
Hence
So,
why
yeah,
Marc is
congrats,
very
Asha.
selective. He's he has limited time. But no, this has been a fun episode. I greatly appreciate you joining us, Marc. Thanks for being here. And Asha, we will have a great time talking next week. In the interim, if
Yes.
you need to catch this on the replay, be sure to check it out on Facebook. It'll be on our page, Conversations with Asha and Steve. We'll also have it on our YouTube channel, Conversations with Asha and Steve. And we have just recently retaken control of our Twitter.
Yes, we did.
Somebody decided that they would borrow. So,
That was so
fortunately, didn't
weird.
like do
Yes.
anything bad, but we now have control,
But
so we
strange.
will begin tweeting on that. And
Yes.
I think this episode may be broadcasting there today too. So hopefully,
Yeah,
but
I think
we'll
so.
see.
Yeah.
So anyway, we appreciate you joining
Great.
us for Conversations with Asha and Steve. And until next time, my friends, you guys take care.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Conversations with Asha and Steve. We love to hear feedback and questions from our listeners. Please feel free to visit our Facebook page for more tips and information. You can also email us directly at info@ripplecentral.com for more information.